Hello everyone, welcome back to the KMTRADERS channel. So this is the full market analysis volume 90, again giving you an insight of what we're looking at for this week and give you a comparison from our analysis from last week. So we are going to go through pretty much all the pairs. So yeah, we'll start off with gold. So we're pretty much on a daily time frame. Just wanted to show you a bit of an outsider perspective, but essentially what we spoke about last week is a potential rollover towards the upside and the possibility of price turning over. So as we can see right now, we've had the analysis drawn here was that we're looking to target around 1840. So for me, I'm still confident that we could push into this range right now. So I believe that this is a possible turnover right now. So what we could be looking at for now is a possibility of looking at a retest on a smaller scale. Sorry, I'm just moving this across, but essentially, we could look at something where price eventually starts to dip down, and then that would be your best buying opportunity. So we could use this as the low being created, and then if this makes a new higher low, sorry, we should make a new higher high, and we should be able to continue to reach into that 1840 range. So that's where I'm personally targeting, and then what we're going to be looking out for here is once we get to 1840 is, are we going to continue to excel higher, or are we going to find a mild rejection? And in that case, we could be looking at a sell-off opportunity in which price goes all the way to the downside. So there's something that I'm looking out for just in case. I'm not saying it's definitely going to happen. So it's one of those it's that case of waiting to see what price does here, and most likely once it gets there, we can pretty much have a more of a better plan and see how strong price action has burst through that 1840 barrier. So yeah, just one final thing just in case though, here is this buy scenario is only valid unless we stay above this zone here, so 1680. So in theory, if this isn't the push where price starts to continue to push higher, the possibility is that price breaks the low once more and then pushes higher. Okay, so just keep that in mind. Let me just push this across, but essentially that's something just to keep in perspective. Okay, and yeah, essentially we're trying to look for those buys as long as we stay above this red zone right here. Okay, so that's pretty much the scenarios that I've got drawn out and prepared for gold. So we'll move on to Euro USD. So Euro USD, this one has been a tricky one throughout pretty much this whole of September, but what ended up happening is price breaking through this low. So if you remember me saying from last week that that we could, if we do break the downside, we'd be looking at a retest. So this is essentially what stage we're potentially looking at right now. We've also hit the 1.16 barrier as well, which I was mentioning a long time ago, if you have been following, that there is a possibility of price getting into here. So it's good to see that that's actually come to fruition now. What we spoke about last week though, however, was that we were looking for price to possibly turn over towards the upside because we had broken the 1.19 barrier here. But obviously we can see that prices clearly fell through, so now we're pretty much on a sell buy bias. Now this doesn't mean that we're not going to be looking for those buying opportunities at all, because in the long run we are still looking for potential the cycle to continue towards the upside, in the sense where we reach the 1.235 level. Okay, so in this case what we're doing is we're just going to continue ride this sell pressure, and then eventually once we start to see price possibly switch over and we start to see some bullish momentum, that's when we can start to look at that buying opportunity. So I'm going to keep this in the sidelines for now, and of course anything can happen this week. If we start to see some massive bull run that breaks a lot of structures, even into 1.18 or even goes above 1.19, then it's clear to say that we are in we're possibly starting this bull run here. So I'm not saying that price is definitely going to push lower. Of course, as we can see from last week, that if we have the breaks of our new highs and lows, it pretty much means it's invalid. So that being said, we are going to be now looking for possible sell setups, and it's going to be valid from this high here, so essentially at 1.19. And in theory, if we can stay below this, we should be pushing lower and lower. So really and truly, this doesn't necessarily mean that sells are now going to drop. Like, this is definitely going to drop massively. Like I said, we're still looking for that retracement, well, this bigger push, okay, towards the upside. So where we stand right now, 1.16, we could expect price to push up higher, possibly, you know, this could be a short-term buy even if you really did want to, but essentially we're looking for something like this, okay? So whether the price, you know, goes into this deeper region here, or if it just makes a little turnover, you know, we're pretty much playing with this high here and this current low here. So it really depends what price wants to do, and if the market opens and price goes lower through the week but then recovers, that can definitely happen as well. So don't take this arrow exactly, but to the exact, you know, what we think price is going to do, like in this route. Just come with the scenario that we are potentially looking at some sell setups, and in that theory we're gonna just have to play within this range wherever price is. And if we start to, you know, essentially cut its way inside, just be prepared for a possible turnover to the downside, and likewise we could still even make some pips towards the upside. So, you know, don't be shy to take some possible buy scenarios. So yeah, we'll see exactly what happens for this pair. So yeah, moving on now to Nzd USD. So as Euro USD has broken the downside, and we could expect more downside opportunities with Euro USD and possibly even gold, there is a possible scenario where price breaks this low. So this is actually going to be my second scenario, my second route, in the sense where we expect price to break this low, and if so, there is a possibility of that retest, okay? But my first scenario that we are sticking with for now, which we spoke about last week, is this buy side pressure. So what we're looking at is for price to possibly turn over towards the upside. So I think this could be a possible sign of bull pressure. It really just depends if we stay above this high here, so 0.68, and ultimately it really just depends if we can hold it. If we break it, then we break it, but as long as we're above this 0.68, we are still going to be looking at a buying scenario, okay? But if we break this, we're going to be looking at a sell setup. So in this case, what we would have to do is probably wait for the next week to come, so that we can wait for price to retrace, and then probably even the week after, that sell setup could come from that week onwards. But like I said, you know, in case you really do want to prepare for the sell side, you know, we could be looking at the turnover here. So it really depends if you want to take some sells, but for me, I'm gonna just possibly keep a sell setup in mind just in case. But ideally, I want to be holding on some longs to break these highs and even into 0.73, okay? So that's kind of like my mindset on this pair for now. Moving on to AUD USD. So you can see pretty much there is a bit of similarity with NZD USD and AUD USD. So we can see that price is turning over, and that's sort of what we were looking into last week. So it's good to see that there is something happening. So what I'm possibly looking at for now is to see if price can make some clearer moves towards the upside. There is still a possibility of price turning to the downside, and in that case, price could just drop lower and then result in price rallying up. So just being mindful of that. But in the case, in the event where price doesn't turn over if we do break lower, then there is a possibility of 0.71 being broken, which is this low, and then therefore we'll need to have a look at a retest scenario, and in that case we will be looking into some sell setups right now. So if this, like I said, if we do get a 0.71 break, we should in theory be taking some sales, but like I said, it can take up to a week or two. Excuse me a second. So yeah, so let's just see what happens with this one, but pretty much we could expect a lot of similarities with AUD USD and Nzd USD. Okay, so let's take a look into USD Jpy. So what we looked at last week were two scenarios. I think my my first case scenario was that we were looking for potential sells if we got into the 111, and we did. But this was only valid if we start to see some rejection. So there was some slight rejections here, but as soon as we broke towards the upside, it pretty much made it invalid for us to even look at a sell. So fair enough, this is exactly what happens, you know, like I said, in trading, that we just have to move on and look at some new scenarios. So like I said, in the second scenario is that if we get price to break this, basically this red zone, we're essentially going to be looking at a retest. So now that we are in this state of mind, we're in a retest situation right now. So what we are looking at now is possibly a turnover towards the upside, and that's just really where I want to stand for now for this pair, because there is an alternative once we get to this high at 112, is that there is a possibility of finding rejections, and if so, we could be looking at price breaking this entirely down towards a downside. So it's something that I'm keeping in perspective, but it's definitely, you know, it doesn't mean that it's definitely going to happen, like I always say. So it really depends how far this stretches towards the upside. But for this week, I'm looking for some buying opportunities to potentially roll over into the upside of 112. So let me check the pip count. So a good 100 pips. So it's definitely worth, in my eyes, the approach to take. So yeah, we'll see what's gonna unfold with this. But we pretty much have been circulating and in this consolidative range for this period of July, which has been so long. But anyway, if you have been caught out of this, don't worry. Like I said, it's definitely one to learn from. You know, this is how I trade, you know, personally waiting for some clearer setups, and it doesn't even mean that because the way that I'm talking about this pair, you know, that we prioritize Usdjpy. It really just depends what we see on the day, and which is the most high probability across all of the pairs. Okay, so that's something that could possibly help you. I mean, you don't have to trade every single pair, but that's essentially what I look out for anyway, just looking at the best possibility. So Aud Jpy. So what I'm looking out for this one, I've actually got so for this week I've actually looked at a possibility of another scenario. So what we've got drawn here is we're essentially expecting price to drop down. So this is our first case scenario, and we're expecting price to essentially rally back up towards the upside. So essentially this is a nice buying setup, and this is still going to be valid until we break the 84.5 barrier, which is this low. So that's my buy setup. Okay, so the second scenario that we're looking at now is because price is really kind of holding off right now. We've seen some sell-off pressure. There is a possibility that if we do break this high, if we find any form of rejection, there is a possibility of price breaking this low. Okay, so I'm not saying this is, like I said, it's definitely going to happen. You just have to look at price action. But the best thing to do for now is to look at a buy scenario, just in case that this fails through, because if this fails and we don't get any rejection from 88.5, we should see a clear rally towards the upside, and we could even make it to 91. Okay, so there is a lot of pips up for grabs here, so just keep that in perspective. And yeah, so we'll move on to Euro JPY. So for this pair, we can see that last week we've had this bull run. There is this possibility that we're looking at now that this is going to hold, and we're essentially looking at a buying option. So we explained that we're looking at this, so we're pretty much coming into making this new higher low. So essentially it's really just a matter of now, are we actually going to turn over, okay, and is this going to be the turnover time? And if so, we should be able to break these the 131 barrier, which is here, and if so, we should be able to start locking in some profits along the way. So the second thing that we could be looking at, that if this doesn't hold, there is a and we break the the 127 or the 128 level, then it's going to be clear that we're going to be looking at a retest, and if so, it will look at something as potentially next week or so, ideally. But let's just keep in mind what we need to do price wise. So we are getting close to this 128 level, so like I said, this could completely fall through, so don't be oblivious to that if that does come to fruition. But like I said, I am looking for a possibility of a buy setup, and in the case that it does work out, we should be able to see price rally towards the upside. Okay, so moving on, let's take a look at Nzd Jpy. So with this pair, we are looking for a possibility towards the upside, but I do have, I'm going to get rid of this one here and this one here. So I do have a second setup here just in case. So the second setup is that price breaks this low here at 76.5. We then, I mean, there may be a possibility of taking a sell here, but I don't really want to focus on that just in case, because I think the likelihood is that, well, the better probable setup is that we get a buy scenario. So that's why I'm going to look at a switch over there. So essentially we're going to be looking at 76.5. If we get a break of this low, there is a possibility of price turning over still. But what we spoke about last week was this essential ability of price turning over. So we'll move this across right now because we are pushing quite low. So we are getting close to this low. So like I said, this is why the second scenario is that we'll get price to break the low. And in that case, if you want to anticipate that, you could take a sell. Okay, let me take a look at the pip count. So it could be just under 100 pips. Again, it really depends if this continues to fall. But if we do start to see this, we could expect price to break the low and then rally towards the upside. But the first, again, the first scenario is that this low holds and that this possibly is the turnover and we start to rally up higher. So just keep those in mind, and that's where I'm pretty much looking. But I'm targeting 79 ideally, and then from there we're going to be watching that reaction, and we'll see what's to come from that level. Okay, so Aud Jpy, it's pretty much a similar situation really. We're going to be waiting for a price to drop off. So we're going to see price, we're expecting price to come just down a bit lower, ideally. So we're going to see where price heads to, and we're going to be looking at 79. So if 79 breaks, then we could be possibly pushing lower into 78, and you could be looking at a sell setup right there. Okay, so they're the possibilities that I'm presenting. But again, like I said, following on from Nzd Jpy, we're still expecting this bigger push towards the upside. So that, in theory, you could also hedge yourself and take a sell here if this, once this break happens, and then once we start to break this low, there is a possibility of price pushing up higher. But again, don't want to overcomplicate this. Let's just stay focused with this level. So at the 79, we get price to go up, we have a retracement a bit lower, and that's where we could expect the new higher low to be formed, and we could be looking at some buying setups. Okay, yeah, so let's move on. So final two pairs, so USD Chef. So we expected the first case scenario for this pair was to drop lower. We didn't actually get that. We got price rally towards the upside. So this is where the second scenario has come into play. So let's just take a look into this right now. So if we step out on the daily, we can really see how congested we are already. Okay, so take a look at the RSI. We have some divergence forming. So like I said, this is divergence, means momentum pushing up higher, has the ability to turn over towards the downside. So with that being said, with this case scenario that we've got drawn here, that there is this possibility of price turning towards the downside. Now I am going to be looking at sell setups until we break this zone here, so roughly at 0.9, roughly at 0.95. okay, so if we do get a break of this level, we are clearly pushing up higher, but because we're still within this range, I am going to be looking at some sell setups, and ideally we're going to be following this route here. So we're going to look for this huge drop in price. Okay, and I believe that that could be a massive 500 pips. So hopefully I can get into this. Hopefully you guys do too. But yeah, we're going to definitely keep an eye on this. Take a look at this trend line. So that could be something that to keep you guys aware of. But essentially, I'm going to be trying to look at a sell setup. So we'll see what we can make of this. Now, USD CAD. Following on from last week, we was talking about if we broke 1.26. So we actually did. Now I'm convinced that we're possibly heading lower. So the first set of what we was talking about, if we started to see some rejections above 1.26, we could expect price to go once more higher and then drop lower. But as we can see, price has basically broken 1.26. So the possibility now stands that we're going to push lower. Ideally, it's not really too clear where we could head, but I am actually anticipating 1.24, so all the way down here. Okay, so whether the price hits this or it doesn't, it's not really too much of a worry. It's essentially just a guideline of where I'm thinking. But the takeaway from this pair is that we're essentially just going to look at a sell setup. Okay, so we're essentially just going to be chasing a retest. So whether it's at 1.26, whether it's just up a little bit higher, or whether that price just moves up a little bit higher and then rolls over, you know, that's still a possibility, you know, so I might as well draw that in. But yeah, so that's essentially what we're looking out for. I'll leave this in actually, so just in case we start to rally massively higher and we break that 1.295 barrier, so this zone, again we're going to be watching out for a retest. Okay, so oops, didn't mean to do that. Hold on. So yeah, so the scenario that we're really looking out for now is just some sells, and it kind of ties in with pretty much the whole of the US dollar, like how the US dollar is playing in USD Chef, Euro USD, Nzd USD, etc. So we're kind of expecting the dollar to kind of get weaker over the next few weeks or so. So essentially, we're expecting the dollar. We're expecting the dollar to get strengthened, but in its due time. So it's in its fluctuations ultimately to push higher. So obviously each pair can act individually different. So we're taking it with a pinch of salt. So essentially what we are looking at for is if we break the 1.26 even further, we're just going to wait for a retest. But this could also stand as a possibility of pushing up higher, and in that case we could eventually look at a sell at the top side. The reason why I'm saying that this could be a buy is because of this bullish pressure here, but also it's now coming back down in a nice retracement area. So pretty much we're just going to have to stay patient and look at the exactly what price action does. Okay. So yeah, that's pretty much this week. I kind of explained a little bit of what I'm thinking. It's pretty much in a half situation where there is a lot of more scenarios than usual. Usually I do try and keep it into one frame and like one type of setup, so you guys can pretty much understand what to expect. But you know, me adding these different scenarios, which is probably just 1 to 3 different scenarios, it kind of gives you more confidence, I guess, going into the week. And obviously I do hope that helps. But yeah, guys, if you made it all the way to the end of this video, I'm going to wrap it up now. I do appreciate your time for listening, of course. Make sure you're subscribed. If you do get any value from this, leave a like. And if you have any other questions, feel free to let me know in the comment section below. So thank you very much for listening all, and we'll see you all in our next week's video.